pretty good too. My friend had my friend Ian. So I had an idea. He was inspired by that story, and his idea was to actually dress up like a bear. But when everybody gathered around, all of a sudden he'd push play on the boombox and start dancing to Electric Avenue. So it's a very similar idea. But I like the travel stories, and my big travel adventure was about 6 years ago. It's if you're a good friend of mine, then you're probably surprised to hear my friends say like, "Oh wow, when was that trip?" And they're thinking I'm going to say last summer. It was 6 years ago, and it's because I work in I give people advice about like housing and money management now. So this is all I have. We spent as much time planning the story as we did actually traveling, and looked at a map, and we had this Pacific-centered map, and so that kind of influenced our decision. We came up with a very logical choice of countries to visit, which was China, New Zealand, Fiji, and the Cook Islands. And we saw all kinds of beautiful things. We spent 3 months in China, which is about 2 months too long. And we saw beautiful things. We went to some cool cultures. Spent a lot of time trying to communicate in areas where not only did they not speak English, of course, but they didn't speak Chinese, which was always fun. But one of the reasons you travel, I think, is, and especially the hard to get to places, is because the other people that are fool enough to travel to the hard to get to places are going to be really interesting, and you're going to have some things to tell you. And I think the Chinese folks, especially in the southern part of the country, I stood out a little bit. I had this canvas hat and the sides buttoned up, so I was a cowboy, and I had tourists coming up to me, and I'm in a lot of photos of Chinese tourists, and there was this one town where we met this interesting character, and I think I was kind of doing the same thing. I was kind of we spent about a week hanging out with this guy Dean, because he was kind of like what made us feel like we were a little closer to life. And when I first saw Dean, I don't know where I was out getting dumplings or something, and I came up in the hostel bedroom, and I see this guy that's about 15, 20 years older than us, leaning on the bed, talking to Alana, like, with a dopey grin on his face, and I'm like, oh, I understand, I get the same grin, but but as soon as I walked in, he's like, oh, hey, how you doing? So I should have run the other way, but we hung out with him for a full week. We loved this guy because he was crazier than us. And now I'm going to kind of get into a story that he told me, and I'll tell you later why I think it makes sense to tell the story. But he was telling us a story about his travels, and he had traveled to harder to get to places. He was in Pakistan, kind of areas where people have these, tribal feuds, and there's mountains and ice and all kinds of crazy things going on. My Pakistani geography was not so good back then, so I'm not sure where this was, but he told me a story about when he laid eyes for the first time a guy in a guest house himself. And he was sitting there eating whatever you eat at a hostel in Pakistan, which it's probably granola and yogurt or something, but and he's sitting there eating. No, he was sipping tea. That's right. It's in Pakistan, of course. He was sipping tea. And this guy comes in and does a full-on, like, Kramer, busts through the door. And he's not dressed, he's probably dressed about as warmly as I am, but it was cold out. And you could tell he just went through hell. And Dean thought, I'll give him some time to settle down. I'm going to get his story. And it was about 4 or 5 days later when he saddled up next to him at this guest house and said, Dean ran away from home in New Zealand when he was 15 because New Zealand's a rough country, And so he went to Australia where everything's good. And Dean had a weird life, so he comes up, so, hey mate, it's his muddled accent. Asked him, I said, what's your story? I saw you coming in the other day. And the guy told his story. And apparently he was a blues brother because he was on a mission from God. And I've always wondered, by the way, I've Googled around trying to figure out the rest of, I want to know, who is this guy? Was anybody ever write a story about him? Where was he from? Can you help me? Where is this guy from in the United States? Mission from God. He's in the middle of nowhere, Pakistan. Probably Missouri. Okay, so probably. Probably Missouri. All right, so this guy's from Missouri, and he has a Missouri life gets in his head, and at some point he's inspired. And God comes and talks to him, and he tells him what he wants him to do. And it's 2005. I guess God had a few years to percolate on this, about 4 years, and he finally told the guy, "You need to go to Pakistan and hunt Osama bin Laden." And I don't know if God told him to take the sword with him, or if that was his own little thing. Like sometimes God's really specific, tell you exactly how many cubits your vehicle should be. I don't know. But so he goes to, I'm pretty sure it's from God. But he has a sword from God, and he's going to Pakistan to hunt Osama bin Laden. And I think he'd been to this, same guest house a little bit before Dean had showed up. And he got ready, and he had his pack, and he had his sword, and he was hiking through the mountains. And God, of course, he had GPS, which is God's satellite positioning, I think, or something. He knew where he was going through the mountains, and he was going to find bin Laden. I'd give anything if I knew. Maybe he was right. But he started out, and it was his first day, and he was climbing the mountains, and he was doing this. And this is, this isn't K2, but this is pretty serious stuff. Like he had pretty, serious gear in his pack for when it got really cold at night. And he gets up to a precipice, and as it was described to me, it was really, this little area he was sitting was really so big. He gets up there, and he puts his pack down, and he's like, just takes a load off. And sits down, and it's kind of uncomfortable when your pulls his sword around, and he knocks his pack off the mountainside. And he just watches it fall. And it's going, and it's not coming back. And he's thinking, do I throw myself down there? Because I'm going to die without this. Like, if he would not have lasted the night. And he sat and thought about it long and hard for about 3 seconds, and he realized he'd been hiking all day long from dawn and I think it was only an hour or two before nightfall at this point. And he realized that his only chance for survival is to run all the way back what he had just done. And that's exactly what he did. He did his full 8-10 hours of trekking in a couple of hours and showed up just after dusk into the guest house. Like that. He had no passport, he had nothing, he had no identification. They just let him stay there on credit. I guess it's not hard to find somebody in areas like that. Look for the guy with the sword. All he's got is a sword. Have you seen the guy? Yeah, he's over there. So this is, and I gotta wonder what happens to your theology at that point, Is that part, did God do that too? I don't know. That was a weird thing to do. Give me that sword. The pack, he didn't give me that pack. That was the So, and I just want to tell you that we spent 3 months in China, it's like 2 months too long. And that story is why we did it. And it was worth every minute.